2024. So please welcome Dr. Bob Jaffe.
Okay, so I wanted to start a conversation about what it's like to age on this island. And it's a ubiquitous process. Everyone's caught up, and no matter what age you are, we're going to continue to grow, we're going to get old, or we're going to die. And people want to be at home on this island and to live there. So I appreciate the introduction. Basically, I went into family medicine because the patients I loved the best were either under 5 or over 80. They were the ones who just had an honesty to them and were the most interesting. But tonight I'm going to talk about Marrowstone Island. I'll bring the slides over to Jessica and figure out how to make them available so you don't have to take notes or there won't be a quiz. Basically, these are my two favorite ones. I think living on Marrowstone Island for me is like living a dream. It's Susan and I have been visiting here for about 8 years and had a house here for the weekends, and then we retired here for the last 3 years. And I just feel very lucky to be here. I love this island, I love the community, and we just really feel like I'm living the dream. So I want to start a discussion about growing up and growing old on the island, the good news and the challenges. I'll talk about the graying process of America that's taking place right now, how to prevent the illnesses and accidents that occur as we age, and start a discussion about who we are as a community. What are we missing in terms of community resources, which ties into the last presentation, and what resources do we already have, and where do we go from here to nourish the growth of our community. Marrowstone is a pretty amazing place. Packed into 6 square miles are about 860 people. About 24% of the people on the island report having gotten here in the last year. Yeah, we have a fire station, a winery. We're about to reopen our island store. We've got a tractor parade, a polar bear plunge, book clubs, breakfast clubs, and more. Half of the island is over 60, and resources for older people are pretty scarce. We don't have public transportation. There's limited shopping. If you don't drive, it's hard to get around. And face it, if half the people in this county were blind, there'd be phenomenal services for the blind in Jefferson County. But half the people in this county are on the older side, and there aren't that many services for older people. And it's not necessarily someone's fault, but we have a limited tax base. The county health department isn't like King County, where I came, where there are all these senior services and offices on aging. But we'll talk about what we do have and see how we can improve them. So I want us to be able to age at home in a healthy, graceful, and comfortable manner. And in fact, the trend is going that way. More Americans are choosing to age and to die at home than any other time in the last 100 years. This year, about 3.3 million people are going to die, and most will die from natural causes, a third from heart disease, a quarter from cancer, a tenth from respiratory diseases, 8% from dementia, 6% from stroke. COVID came along and killed 1 million people over the age of 65 in this country. It's not talked about very much, but it was a huge loss. And it was particularly bad in the US, which is a whole other conversation. And while we can't prevent death, we can influence where and how we die. So a recent study came out from the New England Journal of Medicine and found that between 2003 and 2017, deaths in hospitals and nursing homes dropped, but deaths in homes went up. People are choosing to die at home. It went from 24% to 31% of all deaths in the country. And while death isn't a great topic to talk about, but it's the first time this has occurred in the US in 100 years. And I think it's partly due to the hospice care movement. It's partly due to people wanting to have more control over their lives. And it's a good thing. And I'm not just talking today to people over 60, because half the people on the island are under 60. And even those that are younger, they're struggling to raise children and take care of their parents. And their health issue is a really important thing to me as well. The life expectancy in this country has been dropping for the last 2 years. We used to be going up every year, higher and higher and higher. We're getting towards 75, and now we're dropping toward 70. And it's not COVID that did it, and it's not old people, aren't dying younger. It's that people between the age of 35 and 64 are developing more cancers and chronic diseases. They're making poor lifestyle choices. So a lot of what I talk about tonight is relevant to everybody, regardless of their age. So we'll talk about age terminology. So scientists at Stanford have been studying the aging process. They've come up with words to describe how we age. And middle age means you've got about a 1% chance of dying in the next year. In the 1920s, if you were middle-aged, you were about 44 years old. Today, men are 60 and women are 65 because we're living longer. If you're old, it's a 2 to 4% chance of dying in the next year. In the 1920s, you were old at 55. And today, men are old at 70 and women are old at 73. And the elderly, it has a greater than 4% chance of dying in the next year. In the 1920s, you were elderly at 65. Today, elderly men are over 76, elderly women are about 80. So why is 65 this golden year when we become senior citizens? It's all historical circumstance. FDR signed the Social Security into law in 1935. LBJ did the same with Medicare in 1965. At those times, 65 was considered very old because if you were a farmer or a factory worker or a coal miner in those days, you didn't have that much longer to live. And so the government said, okay, we'll take care of you. It won't be for long. So things have changed. If you're over 65, you're not alone. There are more older people living today, and the quality of their lives is getting better. In the US, 17% of us are over 65, 1 out of 6. But we're all getting older, and Jim Morrison said none of us are going to get out of here alive. The older we get, the more likely we are to die. And getting old is challenging. So when I was starting medical school, there was a guy named Robert Butler, who was a psychiatrist and internist, and published a book entitled Why Survive? And he talked about the way that we have, the poor healthcare system we have in this country, and how poorly we take care of older people. And it was true then, and it's true today. We have a fragmented healthcare system, and it's a challenge to grow old. The greatest resource that we have on this island is in this room right now. America's graying. Baby boomers are people born between 1946 and 65. They've been hitting 65 since 2011. About 10,000 boomers are hitting 65 every day, and they're going to continue doing that until 2030. So by 2035, people over 65 are going to outnumber people less than 18 for the first time in US history. By 2050, there's going to be a 50% increase in people who are 65 and older. So what it means is from 2012 to 2050, people over 65 are going to go from 45 million people to 84 million people. There are over 6.6 million in the US over 85. That's going to top to 19 million in 2050. And about 400,000 of those are going to be over 100. Now, the economics of getting old are pretty stark and challenging. Half of Americans 55 and older have no retirement. Half of Americans over 65 live on less than $30,000 a year. 1 in 4 survive on less than $15,000 a year. 5.3 million Americans 65 and older live in poverty. 1 out of 10 seniors. And poverty for a single person is defined living on $14,000 a year or less. The poverty rates increase the older we get. If you're over 80, the poverty rate is 13%. And without Social Security, that poverty rate for people 65 and older would skyrocket. Half of Americans are at risk of a financially insecure retirement, up from a third of workers in 1983. The average monthly Social Security benefit in 2023 was $1,782 a month, $21,000 a year. Now let's look at Jefferson County. Jefferson County has an average age of 59, which makes it the oldest county in the state and the 3rd oldest county in the country. The average age of Marrowstone is 60. So we beat them. If Marrowstone was the county, we'd be the oldest county in the U.S. If Marrowstone was a nation, we'd be the oldest nation on the world. We're older than Japan, we're older than Monaco, you know, we're old. We're leading the aging parade. A recent worldwide survey found that those over 65 are generally happier than those under 65, and we got the best message. So when Tony Fauci turned 80, they asked for his advice, and he said, take care of yourself, get some reasonable sleep, don't get overcome by stress, have a good diet, enjoy life, don't do things in excess, and exercise is really important. He runs every day. So there are steps that we can take to grow healthier, longer, higher quality lives. And let me just see where I'm at. I'm moving along. So, one thing about Marrowstone is that we're close to nature here. And science has shown that when you're closer to nature and you're taking those bathing walks in the forest that the Japanese talk about, you live longer, you sleep better, you have improved cognitive function, lower heart disease, less obesity, less depression, less stress. So get out of your houses and enjoy the beauty that's around us. And Fort Flagler is a big chunk of that. Yeah. So in order for us to live independently, there are goals that we have to have in mind. I had a mentor in medical school named Sid Katz, and he developed the activities of daily living, the ADL they talk about in the hospital all the time. And basically, it means that you gotta be able to ambulate, walk, sit, stand, lie down, get up, go up and down the stairs, inside and outside the house. You have to be at a lower risk of falling. You've gotta be able to groom yourself. So getting in and out of the shower, the tub, brushing your teeth, shaving, take care of your hair, toileting, you know, taking care of your bladder and your bowels, they become incredibly important. Sometimes bladder and bowel control dictate whether or not you stay in your house or you have to leave and go to assisted living or something. You have to be able to clean up after yourself. You have to be able to dress yourself. You have to be able to prepare your food and eat your food. And those are the 5 basic things that we all have to think about as we age. And there are ways to stay on track with that. Now, the occupational therapists are the people who come to our houses after we get out of the hospital from a stroke or a fall or a cardiac surgery or whatever, and they check to make sure that we can take care of ourselves. They came up with 10 things in addition to those. They include managing your finances, taking care of your health, which means getting to your doctor, taking your medicines the way they're supposed to be taken, being able to shop, which is the transportation issue that I get concerned about. Being able to prepare and eat your meals, and transportation again. Being able to use a phone, email, keep in touch with people, do household chores, take care of pets, kids, other folks around the house, maintain your religious practices, hobbies, and other interests, and knowing safety procedures, emergency contacts, and responses. Now, this is something I get in the mail, and we all get stuff in the mail. This is, from a medical school, and it's probably fine. They want to sell you a newsletter to tell you how to stay healthy. But, I bring it up because we're inundated with media messages about never aging and being able to drive into your 90s and 100s and, never having to restrict what you do. And if you just take this pill or this vitamin or go to this class or buy this book, you're going to live forever. And the fact of the matter is, most of the people in our community who hit 100 and beyond, they hit it because they got good genes and good luck. And it didn't have much with a magic vitamin or, some other special exercise or a diet. But there are things that will influence that and help us get older. In the U.S., we just worship youth, and we hope to never get old. We never want to wrinkle. We never want to lose our hair. And, it's like, I want to be practical about it. There's no magic bullet, and we can't prevent aging, but we can do it better. So how do we counter the effects of aging? Moderate exercise, healthy diets, 7 to 9 hours of sleep, not smoking, and either no or moderate alcohol use, and staying mentally active and engaged in community. pretty simple. You know, it's the stuff your mother or grandmother probably told you. Now, the exercising, the National Institute on Aging recommends 2.5 hours of exercise a week. It's not a lot, but you have to be consistent. You have to change it around. You have to stay with it. And you know what they find is that it'll reduce feelings of depression. It releases oxytocin. It changes your brain chemistry. It helps you sleep better. It helps you think better. It gives you better energy levels. So all of us need to incorporate exercise into our home, into our lives. And we have to work on it in 4 ways. There's exercise about endurance, aerobics, walking, running, biking. There's strength and weights. We build up balance and stability. There's balancing exercises that help to prevent falls. There's exercises like yoga that help to improve flexibility. Those 4 things will help you age well. Now there's a couple things I'll hit on tonight. One of them are falls. And it's one of the biggest preventable problems for people as we age. I mean, I fall regularly because I like to hike and I have braces on my legs and I'm always tripping on roots. But I have to focus on that so I don't injure myself. 1 in 4 people over 65 are going to fall. So it's like 361,382 people fell in Washington who were over 65. It's a lot of people falling. 1 in 5 of those falls are going to result in a serious injury, like head trauma or a fracture. And 1 in 5 people over 65 who get a hip fracture die within a year due to prolonged immobility, deconditioning, additional falls, infections, pneumonia. So we have to work on fall prevention. And there's basically just a couple of things. Make sure that you see well. Work on your balance and your muscle strength. And then look at your home. You know, one of the most dangerous places in our homes, the 2 most dangerous places in my home, are the bathroom and the stairs. So we should be looking at railings, looking at banisters, getting rid of all our rugs, or making sure they're nailed to the floor. And these are things that are just very common causes for falls and injuries. The second thing I want to hit on is choking. And the message is, don't look up when you're reading. It gets worse as we get older. And I'm not exactly sure all the reasons for it, but it's the most common cause of choking. There are voluntary and involuntary aspects of eating, but when you lift your head up, if you ever took a CPR class, that's what you do with those anti-dolls. You extend the head up, which opens the trachea and the airway. If you lift your head up when you're swallowing or eating, you're going to choke, or you're more likely to. So when you eat and drink, don't look up. Take smaller bites. Chew carefully. Make sure you drink you drink with your meals so they have more moisture in your mouth, because we have less saliva as we age. And those are 2 things that you could work on that will improve your life. And the last piece I want to talk about are diseases of despair. And I hope I'm not being too down on things, but this is a really important topic that I'd like to see more community discussion about. And let me go back to my notes. There's an epidemic of loneliness going on. And the drug overdoses, suicide, alcohol abuse, and depression, they've gotten worse, but they were getting worse before COVID hit. They got really bad when COVID hit, and we were all isolated in our little bubbles. But they continue to be a big issue. Suicide rates increased 37% between 2000 and 2018, before COVID. Then they dipped down a little bit, and now they're back up to where they were in 2018. Depression rates among teens and seniors have dramatically increased, and there's kind of a U-shaped curve on this, where the adolescents are really depressed, and then we kind of get better, and then we become older, and then we get more depressed again. We often ignore the depression among older people. The percentage of Americans who claim to have no close friends have quadrupled between 1990 and 2000. We're spending more time alone. We spent 6.5 hours a week with friends in 2013, but only 2.5 hours in 2021. So loneliness and social isolation, they peak in our communities when we're teenagers and when we're old. I talked about the U-shaped curve. And it's being seen not just here in the US, it's being seen worldwide. And sometimes you'll read the news and you'll find out about a minister of loneliness who's been appointed in England or Denmark or Sweden We haven't done that here, but they're seeing an epidemic of loneliness going on in our communities, and it has a huge health impact on the quality of lives, and they're trying to figure out ways of approaching it. So how do we strengthen our communities? Wait, I'll go back. Whoop, how do I go back? This way. We need to rebuild and support the social infrastructures. We need more social connection with friends, family, and neighbors, and we need to volunteer more. And then about volunteering, if you're thinking about it, the question you should ask is, what have I learned in life? What can I teach? What activities bring me joy? What can I give back to in my community? Volunteering helps ourselves, it helps others. Each of you are an encyclopedia of life experience. You all have something to offer. And what's interesting about this little island, you know, we're 6 square miles, we're 860 people, but we have all these organizations. It just kind of blew me away when I moved here. So the Marrowstone Island Community Association, the Marrowstone Island Foundation, the Northern Garden Club, all the people who are giving reports, Friend of Fort Flagler, the Community Store Cooperative. You can either join a program or an organization or make your own. We have just an amazing community on this little island. And you know, the more I live here, the more I uncover secret book clubs and secret food markets and secret breakfasts and you know and all these things that, because there's no place to meet in this island. You know, it's like there's a winery, and that's nice, but you can't just, you know, I'll bump into people, I'll say, this is great, let's get together in the woods, let's get together at your house or mine, but there's not much business here, you know. That's why I'm very excited about it. We're all excited about the store opening up. There's actually a place that we can sit and look at each other. I want to talk a little bit about, how am I doing on time? Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the county. And so I've been looking for the last few months about who's out there to help us on Marrowstone and what resources are there that we can make ourselves available to. ECHO was started by the Ecumenical Council and the Presbyterian Church. It's up in Port Townsend. They've got this little old house that is crammed full of wheelchairs and canes and walkers and durable medical
So you know it was
equipment.
started by an islander here.
Oh, really?
Yes.
That's good to know.
Yes.
You know, it's a wonderful organization. They have 2 functions. They store that equipment and they get it to people's homes, or you can pick it up there. And they have a group of volunteers that will take you to your doctor's appointments or help you with transportation. And they come out here to do that as well.
Oh, Bob, they'll take you to Seattle.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They did that with my parents.
Yeah, they mentioned they don't want to do it too often. It's a distress, but they have taken people out because if you have cancer and they don't have treatment here, you're going to the Hutch or something, and there you are, sick, weak, and going back and forth across the pond. It's hard to do. But they're one organization. And then the fire chief was here last week, and they started this Fire Cares program for non-emergent 911 calls. And they will take a truck out to someone's house if neighbors are worried about them, or if someone's having a problem. And the most common thing is, I fell down and I can't get up. If you look at the types of calls they get, that is the most common. The blue piece of that pie are falls. And so I think older people are taking more use and advantage of those services, and they're wonderful. They'll also go down to Port Townsend, pick up your walker, and bring it to your house, which is pretty incredible. I just threw this one out here because the 2 biggest users of their services are Port Townsend and Port Ludlow, which makes sense, there's more people there. But way off on the side is Marrowstone. And if you look at the number of calls per capita, it's the most here than anywhere else in East Jefferson County. So there's a need. The Olympic Area Agency on Aging, or the OA3, is state funded, and it's on your way to Marrowstone in one of the first circles there. And it was started through federal and state legislation in '73, and it offers support to seniors, disabled adults, and families that are trying to help them. So they have help with insurance, and in fact, Nancy McGonigal's here, and she works with Shiva, which is the health insurance group that the state helps to fund, and they counsel people about insurance. It's not like a low-income counseling thing. facing the confusion when you're hitting 65 and suddenly you don't have insurance for your job and you're trying to figure out what Medicare is and how to deal with it. And they run workshops around here, either on the island or doing one in Quilcene soon, and we could talk a bit about that later. They also will help with some emergency funds, some legal advice, assistance in aging planning and decision making. I brought some brochures that they put together about resources in the counties. A lot of them are out in Port Angeles, but it's a little source of information. And then OnlyCap will help with weatherization of homes, and they have some limited financial ability to help with bills and rent and general assistance, housing assistance. And there's a Housing Solutions Network, which is a nonprofit that will also help to connect people who are in a house alone and want to have a roommate who can give them rent, maybe help with the landscaping, help with the groceries. There's an opportunity there where older homeowners can bring in younger people. It's more formalized in some of the bigger towns, but Port Townsend has these two resources. One is the OA3, the Office on Aging, and the other is this Housing Solutions Network. And it's an opportunity that we may want to look at on our island and discuss, because I think it's an exciting way to help with housing and help with the people who live here. So where do we go from here? And how do we optimally plan to age in place? And how do we help our neighbors in the Marrowstone community? And these were just some thoughts that I had, but I'm hoping we'll have a little time for discussion. Formalizing island transportation assistance for Marrowstone residents. I was at a breakfast a few weeks back, and there was an island resident who's in his 60s and he's blind. Well, you can get a ride assistance on Thursdays that will take you someplace, but the timing is a little odd and it's once a week. So transportation is a huge thing. As soon as something happens, like you have a seizure, you can't drive, or you're too old to drive, living on this island becomes a much bigger challenge. How do we deal with it? So one conversation I had with people that were working on the store was having a writer board where we can list our appointments that are coming up and see if someone is heading to Seattle or can help us get someplace or just get us down to the grocery store this week. Finding roommates is another one. We talked a bit about that. And the last one I'm tossing out is, how do we check on each other? Maybe we should occasionally open up the mailbox of a neighbor that we don't talk to very much if we're concerned about whether or not they're picking up their mail. Or maybe the postal delivery person will let someone know when this is happening. I mean, when I talk to the person who runs the ECHO program, they'll often find out someone who's having trouble living alone when they send a volunteer over to pick them up. And they open the door and they realize they're not cooking food, the place is a mess, there's a bad smell coming, they smell bad, they're not changing their clothes, they're incontinent. But we don't have a formalized system yet on this island. And we talk about it in terms of tsunamis and earthquakes and having hubs so people go somewhere in emergency. I would like to see a conversation take place where the entire island is not just mapped out, but people have a way of knowing and checking in on their neighbors so we know that we're all okay. I mean, I'm impressed by the generosity and charity and goodwill of the people who live here, but it's an interesting island. Some people move here to not see anybody, and they're waiting for Armageddon, and they just stay off my property. They got those goofy signs that say no trespassing, and it has 3 paragraphs of writing that you have to actually get onto the property to read in order to understand what it means. But we're all in this together, and I think we all want to stay here. And I think that's basically what I wanted to offer you in terms of information. And what I can do, as a person experiencing aging, but it's also someone who's been taking care of elderly people for a long time. I can come back or bring people with me who know more than I do and have a more focused conversation about dental health, specific exercises for specific diseases. I can have someone in the PT and OT world come in. I can have people that are stronger and buffer than me demonstrate things to you. There are other topics that we can go into. I'd like to actually open it up and see if there are questions or comments that people have. But before I do that, I had one thing I wanted to do. So it's not a big crowd here. It's like about 35 or 40 of us here. But those of you who are members of the Garden Club, would you just stand up and stay up for just a minute? Okay. And then those who have been working on the Northern story, would you mind standing up? And just stay up, everyone. Just stay for it won't take very long. Those who are members of Friends of Fort Flagler, to stand up. Those that are on the myth board, stand up. Those that are members of MICA or on the MICA board, stand up. You know, I think you need to look around and just see the incredible compassion and participation that takes place on this island. And we're already many steps ahead of other communities. So you can sit. I just think you're all amazing. And you should all be doing. And that's it. I wanted to open it up to questions. I know